Director Atkinson.
Here.
Director Gomez.
Here.
Director Calandri.
Here.
Director Thibault.
Here.
Phyllis Stanin.
Here.
Greg Harvey.
Here.
Director Harris.
Here.
All present.
We're on adoption of the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda? Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Motion made by John, seconded by Leo. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Public comments? Any public comments? Seeing no public comments, we move on to the consent agenda. We're on consent agenda. Item A, payment of bills through August 17, 2018. Matt Peter.
Good morning. Included in your board packet is a brief memo, and staff is recommending the board approve the invoices for Berkey Cox. That's performing the audit for 2016 and 2017 in the amount of $7,000. Our monthly payment to GlowTrans for the website hosting of $1,200 for the month of July. And then Mr. Parkin's invoice for services rendered in July for $11,225.13. So a total amount of $19,425.13. You may be asking yourself, do we have enough money to pay those?
That's what Leo asked.
We do have roughly $30,000 in our checking account. So we have enough to currently cover these invoices. Also, some other good news, Palmdale is working on invoicing Exhibit 3 producers for their import water return flows. So those invoices will be going out next couple days, and that will generate additional revenue to get through the end of this calendar year.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the payment of the bills? Consent calendar item A. Motion made by Dennis. Second by Richard. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried unanimously. On to Treasurer's report, consent agenda item B.
So also including in board package is our monthly treasurer's report, and be happy to answer any questions you may have on that.
Any questions on the Treasurer's report? Do we need to approve the Treasurer's report?
Yeah, since we're going through the consent calendar or consent agenda one by one, we should approve each one.
Got it. Any questions on Treasurer's report? Is there a motion to approve the Treasurer's report ending July 31st, 2018? Motion made by Leo. Second by Dennis. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. We're on item C of the consent agenda, minutes of June 27th and July 2nd. Take a look at those, please. So on our agenda, it says July 22nd, but the minutes are July 24th. Is that correct?
I'm sorry,
Okay, I'm going to take. Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes of July 27th, 2018, and July 25th, 2018? Motion made by Dennis. Second by John. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. We're now on action items, new replacement well production applications, consideration possible action on resolution number R1826. Phyllis.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, wait. Dennis, is there an advisory report? I know you wanted me to skip you, but I caught me.
Good morning, Dennis Lamro with the advisory committee. We did meet last week and we reviewed what was just the well applications, transfers, had no specific comments. The committee though, is concerned about the adequacy of the monitoring network, and we'll probably talk about that and what could be done to improve it in the future.
What do you mean by monitoring that?
The groundwater monitoring, as far as being able to determine whether there is material injury with transfers.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Okay, now we're on action items. Item A, Phyllis.
Thank you. I have on your screen summarized what you already have in your board packet, and I collapsed several of these together so that my table is a little bit shorter than yours, but it's essentially the same information. So we have for our applications recommended for approval, we have 2 new points of extraction, 8 new monitoring wells, 1 small pumper providing qualifying documentation, and 1 applicant for new production. I've put these on a map so that we can have some kind of an idea about where these are. The 2 new points of extraction are in the West Antelope sub-area, and this is actually agricultural production that is ongoing. It's not changing in rate or location, but it is now going to be under a different production right. So this is the Antelope Valley Water Storage banking area, the former Willow Springs banking area, and that area is being leased to agricultural interests, and they are pumping for agricultural irrigation on the banking property. And previously, that production had been assigned to the AV Water Storage production right, and now everyone has agreed that they would like for it to be assigned to the resource production right, which they have a production right as well. So we just called it a new point of extraction because we didn't exactly have the form for changing production right, but there's no change in how much is going to be pumped from those wells. In addition to the new points of extraction, we have 8 new monitoring wells being proposed at the U.S. Air Force Plant 42. Those are monitoring wells. They use the replacement well application form because that does double duty for a monitoring well application as well. So those are the ones that are in your packet. And I believe that the cover letter that I have in there only says that there's a total of 6. But there was an additional application for 2 more monitoring wells, so there's now a total of 8 that's being asked for your approval. Again, just monitoring wells. The small pumper qualifying documentation is in the southeast sub-area, and that is a well that is very well documented and meets the qualifying requirements for an unknown small pumper. And then finally, we have a new production application also in the southeast sub-area for a domestic well, 1 household use for that well. They will be paying the replacement water assessment. So these are the completed applications for wells that we recommend approval and provide the board today.
Any questions, any discussion?
On resolution R 1826, how many acre feet are being pumped out of that annually? Do you have that?
So the resolution actually includes everything that we have just talked about. I think what you're asking about is the Meritorino wells, and I can't remember exactly how much it is, but it's something on the order of 70 to 80 acre-foot a year per well.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing no further questions, is there a motion to approve resolution number R 1826?
So moved.
Motion made by John,
Second.
second by Leo. Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. We're now on item B, consideration of possible action on proposed water transfers. Consideration of possible action on resolution number R 1827. Phyllis?
And again, I have summarized what is Exhibit A in your board packet on your screen now. Essentially, we have a production right of 736 acre-feet by F&S Holding Company, who would like a permanent transfer of portions of that to Diamond Farming, Greenway Enterprises, and Crystal Organic Farms LLC, as shown on your screen, totaling 600, transferring from that 736.44 acre-foot a year production line.
Is there any discussion on the transfer rates?
2 questions. Where is the water currently being extracted, and where will the new extraction point be?
The new extraction points are the locations are different for each one of those, and it's essentially in areas where Diamond and Greenway and Crystal are already farming. I'm sorry, I don't have a map to show you, but we have in the packet the
And no
APMs.
No expected damage to the basin.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Is there a motion to approve resolution number R1827? Motion made by Leo, seconded by Dennis. Any further discussion? See no further discussion. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. We're now on rules of order for the Watermaster meetings, discussion only.
This item was requested by Director Thibault, so.
Leo?
As part of our information put out since last meeting, we had letters regarding the replacement of directors, especially from the landowners. And I think the obvious picture is that in the near future, there's going to be changes on the board. And we have spent a lot of time in the last 2 years as a board and as staff working on how to make these meetings productive and workable and transparent. If we were to go to any one source, we would certainly not find all of the information on how this meeting is to be conducted and how we get things done. So thinking that if we could come up with a source, a place where all of the information that is included now in the judgment, in our rules and regulations, in the website, in our head, and you know, the things we have talked about in terms of Robert's Rules of Order in conducting the meeting, if we could find a way to put that all in a readily accessible site, concise, I think it would be helpful to our audience, and especially helpful to new board members so that they're not reinventing the wheel. I'm talking about things like the date and time of the meetings. You will recall that we were jumping around for a while, and it was really confusing for everybody's calendar. And so that's one of the things that, you know, we can go now, but it's nothing official about the time and date. How the agenda is determined. I think all of us know how it happens, but with new board members, new staff, and especially does the audience know how, you know, what the requirements are for getting an item on the agenda. I was not present at the last meeting, but I understand I've had some feedback about presentation that how did you get on the board, you know, and I mean on the agenda. So I think if we have those things written down, it might be certainly easier for the chairman and everybody, including, and I'm really emphasizing people that have an item of business to bring before us, how do I get it there? So we need that simple, easy to access site. The role of the advisory committee, I think, is could and should be included in that, because I think our advisory committee is a very vital part, and it's even addressed in the judgment, so that again, anybody that has an item would need to know that it needs to go through the advisory according to the judgment prior to being brought here to the board. So, as we all know, the rules should be the same for everybody, but we need to know what they are, and they need to know where to find them if they don't know. And so it brought up the issue of why do we need to have another document, another source that says this is the way this meeting is going to be conducted, and this is what you need to do to be in order to do it. So that's why it's an agenda item. I would assume it would be a committee that maybe the advisory, or at least an item that the advisory would look at and get back to us. I am concerned as we transition board members that we don't start reinventing the wheel that we've already invented. So that's why we're here.
Thank you, Leo. Any further discussion? Phyllis?
I just wanted to say thank you very much for the ideas. So there is a chapter in the rules and regulations that I think that this could cover. And the rules and regulations document, as you know, has been put together just section by section. And so we haven't covered that yet, but I think that that could easily be incorporated into the working draft of the rules and regulations. One of the reasons that I haven't tackled that yet, and because there's already a lot of help for that, the advisory committee has a working subcommittee now on defining some roles and responsibilities. And so it seems that that would also be a part of the kind of thing that you're talking about. So it's sort of being put together, I think, a little at a time here, but I agree with you. I think that there could be something very simple, very straightforward with all of the items that you just mentioned, put forth in the rules and regulations document.
Any further discussion? From the public, we need to sign.
Is that in the rules and regulations?
Yeah, but you haven't been here when we implemented that one.
One of the items that, when and where.
And again, for the public, if any of you have any comments on any one of the agenda items, we have forms out there for you to sign that can be brought up to me so I can keep track of what's going on. I will be very liberal at first, but we need to start working towards that. So Keith, you want to speak on action item 8C?
I want to speak on this topic. Is that?
That's action item 8C.
Yes. All right.
Thanks.
Just real quick, another thing to consider is, I think there are places in the judgment where this board is gonna have to act potentially in a quasi-adjudicatory way. You'll have people with competing claims maybe, and you'll be asked to make a decision on that. It's a good idea to have rules in place ahead of time also for due process reasons, so that you're not, we don't know when this is gonna happen. It could happen 2 meetings from now, and it's important to have the rules in place so that everybody feels like they're being heard fairly and have an opportunity to be heard, and that there's not information coming in from other sources or other directions that's not being, not being presented at the meeting. So Again, I would encourage you guys to consider adopting something like this, and I talked to Mr. Parton about it this morning, and I think he's got an idea of what we're talking about. It would be very helpful for developing this kind of concept.
So Keith, what is the real concern? We had an agenda item last month that had come in through John Calandri that I approved to be on the agenda for Gene to speak. Is that the issue that we're talking about, or is there other issues?
No. When we have our steering committee meetings, we spend a lot of time sort of discussing how is the agenda being prepared and what the process is, and when it's appropriate to ask things that go on. So in the course of having those discussions, we realized that there really isn't anything in writing anywhere that sort of describes all of these processes, and you know, representing other public entities, that's sort of what I'm used to having, is a rules of order type document for these kinds of things. There's a lot of, you know, obviously we have to follow the Brown Act, and we said that we're going to follow Robert's Rules of Order, and we obviously have to follow the judgment. But even when you consider all of those documents, there's a lot of things that are rules that just fall between the cracks of those documents. You know, what is supposed to be in the minutes? You know, the Brown Act doesn't even require you to have minutes. We're required to have minutes, I think, because the judgment says we're going to have minutes, but it doesn't say who's going to prepare them and what's in them. You know, when are they going to be adopted? When are they approved? What's the significance of that? And you know, time and date of the meeting, Leo mentioned, that's not, it says we're supposed to have a meeting, but we don't have a document that actually says when it's going to be. We just have this understanding. So it's really trying to set out the stuff that I think is not controversial, but do it now while there's not a lot of controversy. So that later on, when we get back to a mode, if that happens, where we have controversy, the rules are already laid out. No one's going to feel like the rules are designed to hurt them. It's, you know, this is the rules we all agreed to. Does that make sense? And the great example is the one I just did, the speaker cards. That's not contained anywhere. It's something you guys adopted, I think, when I wasn't here. But
You were afraid you'd object.
I like, you know, I recommend that my clients use speaker cards, particularly for larger meetings. It's a good way of controlling the meeting, and it gives you guys a heads up on when people want to talk. So that's something that is in the standard rules of order. And, you know, time limits on speakers. I guess I've been rambling for a little while right now, but that's something you guys might want to consider too.
You have 10 more seconds, you're good.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Keith. Any further discussion?
Is there any discussion, any comments as to where this should go? Is it something that the advisory committee would look at their next meeting and come back with a yes or no, or this is how we'd like to see it done?
Actually, Leo, I think a better place for it to come from is our administrative staff to our water master engineer to the advisory committee. So, and then come back up to us.
And the advisory committee, I'll let them speak for themselves, but they have a subcommittee working on
Correct.
many of these issues right now.
But normally, at least most of the boards I'm on, those type of issues come up as a first draft from the administrative staff, and then if they're subject, this is the only board I have an advisory committee, but that would be that after Phyllis and Craig have a chance to review, go to the advisory committee and work its way back up to us, probably would be the best way to get it. Matt, Peter, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we agree. We could take a stab at it. We've already been tasked through Phyllis to help with the administrative section of the rules and regulations. So
Great.
we could incorporate into that.
Perfect, thank you.
And I would suggest that anybody that works on it, thinking about it, look at what is included in the rules and regulations regarding this topic, and use that to start with.
Great, thanks, Leo. Any further discussion on item C? See none. Moving right along to administrator's report. Landowner and alternate landowner representative nominations.
Yeah, included in your board packet is a copy of the letter and documents that admin staff sent out to exhibit 4 parties on August 16th. And it has to do with the upcoming nomination for Director Calandri's seat. Under for Exhibit 4. So in that letter, it outlines the timeline, included the forms to go through and have the parties submit nominations for that seat. So it's not only the landowner seat, but the 2 alternate seats as well. So we sent that out. If there's no questions on that. Just a heads up that we will be working on the 2019 budget and be bringing that back as a draft in September for the advisory committee to consider and the board to consider. And part of that budget will include some recommended scopes and defined tasks that we'd like to focus on for the remaining portion of 2018 and calendar year 2019. That will also include a proposed amendment submitted by Todd Groundwater. As you know, they're currently out of budget based on the approved 2018 budget, so we'll be discussing and consider a small amendment to the contract.
Great, thank you.
I have
Any questions?
One
John?
question going back to the agenda item 6 on the bills that we paid. What did you say was in the bank account?
Roughly 30,000.
That's going to take us how far?
Well, we have 30,000. We just approved just under 20,000.
Right.
But we are in the process of invoicing imported water return flows for party Exhibit 3 holders. And that's going to be a significant amount of money to get us through the end of 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Engineers report, Phyllis?
The only thing that I'd like to emphasize is that we're still seeing a slow dribble of the meter installation process. I have up there that 38 parties have now, I have 33 parties have completed meter documentation. The number's actually 39 as of this morning. We've been working hard to get as many in as we possibly can. I did want to remind the public water suppliers that even though they already have meters on their wells, most of them, that we still need documentation of those existing meters. It's the only way that we have to be sure that our production is all metered. So just taking this opportunity to suggest that 7 of the public water suppliers still have not provided any documentation of their existing meters. So we'd like to have that information as soon as we can get it. We're working with staff to develop a letter and email out to the parties that have not provided meter installation documentation to date.
Thank you, Phyllis. Item 11, Craig.
Okay, update on motions and the appeals. First on motion, since the last time we met on August 9th, the court heard our motion on storage agreements and granted a motion. At the same time, acknowledged that we had filed our annual report. The court noted that he'd seen that. They're not required, or he's not required to approve it, just that it's been filed with him and he was recognized that fact. There was also a motion to intervene on August 9th by La Cosepa. They had already been approved for their transfer of water or their production right, new production right. So there was nothing controversial. We didn't oppose it, and that was granted. The only other thing on calendar before we meet again is a motion to intervene by Mr. Sellett, who's spoken a couple of times here. I don't plan to oppose it, but legally it's insufficient for a number of reasons. I'm concerned the judge is going to want to hear what our opinion is, and I intend to tell him that we don't oppose it. Obviously, the board approved the transfer of 1 acre-foot to him. It's just the process has gotten kind of muddied in him representing himself before the court. And I don't want to make life more difficult for him. I'll try to suggest a solution to the court to get an order granted, approving his intervention into the case as a party. But I'll just tell the board this is what happens when people don't take our advice to get an attorney to file a motion to intervene. It's a simple process, but it's now become, frankly, a bit of a mess. And it's going to take time for me to unravel that to the judge. who I think is going to want to know, do we oppose the motion? We don't. We approve the transfer. But I think the judge needs to hear what needs to be done to approve it. So I plan on doing that September 12th. I do not recommend opposing the motion. We already, as a board, we already approved the transfer. But his motion is a page and a half. It doesn't have any points and authorities, no proposed order. Doesn't talk about his status as a trustee, whether he's the sole trustee or not. I'm not sure he even has standing to bring a motion to be self-represented. So that's something the court is going to want to know from us, what our opinion is, and that's what I intend to inform the court that we do not oppose this happening, but here's the data you need to make it happen. So that's September 12th. As far as the appeals, last time we were together, I believe Director Riki expressed interest in what was going on with the various appeals that are in the case. All the appeals predate my entrance into the case by a couple of years, except the recent Phelan appeal. So on page 156 is a chart, and I'm happy to say that it was provided by other counsels who've been involved in this case for a long time. I circulated this chart on 156 to all the lawyers that I knew that had been involved in the case and are involved in it now for comment as to its accuracy. I heard back from several. I heard back from 2 public water supplier councils that the chart was accurate as to what the status of the various appeals happens to be. And I heard back from Phelan's counsel that this was correct. So we have a few pending appeals. Apparently there's appeals going on with respect to the attorney's fees order. I don't know that anything is teed up for hearing now. The one appeal that I am interested in is the final one, the Phelan appeal of the order denying their ramp down request. The reporter's transcript has been filed. It's complete. The record on appeal is done. We're just awaiting the briefing schedule, and I'll update you when I hear more on that. But that's the update of the appeals as of August 2018. If there are more questions about what any specific appeal is about, I can get that information for you, but I didn't dig any deeper than getting this chart, circulating it, and seeing it, and reading the printout from the 5th Appellate District as to what has been filed and what's on board. So that's the status of appeals and the motion situation as of now. The second topic is compliance with the judgment. I wanted to bring you up to date. Last month we sent out about 10 or so letters to people that were pumping that we had a indication were pumping in outside the terms of the judgment or in violation potentially of the terms of the judgment. We heard back from at least 8 of them through counsel wanting to engage us in further discussions. The approach that I've taken on this so far is to send a letter saying, after we hear back from them, telling them what we think their legal status is under the judgment. That's where I think we start. Some of these people are not parties. They need to intervene. We've got that clarified. Some of these people are parties. They've been defaulted, but they're on the small pumper list. It goes ad infinitum as to the iterations that some of these people have. But my approach has been to start with getting agreement from them what their legal status is under the judgment. Once we agree on that, the second step is to meet with them, their counsel, and discuss potential terms that we would recommend to the board for them to be involved in bringing their production into compliance with the judgment. Almost all the people don't need to intervene. They're already parties. They're on the small pumper list. They're defaulted. We've got people that are on opt-out list, small pumper list, default list, and Lord knows what other lists they're on. But they are subject to the judgment, and I've advised them that they do not need to intervene, but they need to talk to us about their pumping. And that's where the discussion is going to go from then. My recommendation is that by the next meeting, I list out all those people, what their legal status is, and what my recommendation, along with discussions with Phyllis, would be about the terms for these people to get their pumping back in compliance, whether it's installation of a meter, paying for that, payment of replacement water, whatever it might be. We're just starting those discussions. I've just heard back from a number, some I haven't heard from. And I'm going to ask for your direction next month to do what we told people we would do if we didn't hear from them, especially if they're pumping, they're not parties to the judgment, they're within the jurisdiction of the court, and we need to take steps with respect to that. So I intend to do that at the next meeting. We do have one of the parties, just heads up, when I informed them they're on the small pumper list, they replied that was a mistake. We never got notice of the lawsuit. Client has no actual notice of the lawsuit. We should be on Exhibit 4, not on the small pumper list. And I just informed you there is a party out there that's a substantial pumper that believes that they're mischaracterized in the judgment. So I'll suggest a recommended approach to them too. That's the topic of compliance with the judgment. Third on my update list is production rights transfers. That was also Director Riki had questions about whether we wanted to record transfers on the chain of title of either the transferor or transferee. And I provided a brief memo on page 158 of your packet. And the bottom line of it is, I don't think it's a good idea for this board and the Watermaster to get involved in recording transfers of production rights on property. Because if we don't take into account, if we don't do due diligence properly and we record something as a transfer that ends up with some kind of cloud on title, we're going to end up in the litigation here. I do think there are some things that we can do to tighten that up, to encourage parties to record transfers. I think they have a legal duty to do so on their property. If they're a transferee or a transferor of production rights on their property, they need to fully disclose that. But I do not think this board should be in the process of taking responsibility for recording transfers. That's the recommendation of that memorandum. I would recommend that we re-look at the transfer request form that we have to see if we can amend it, to tighten it up a little bit, to give encouragement to people involved in transfers, to give notice to people that have liens on their property. Not our responsibility again, but making it clear on the transfer request form that people that have property interests, banks with loans on it, are being advised that there's a production transfer occurring that may impact their security interests in the property. I do not recommend we get involved in doing anything about that. It's just a disclosure that I think would be helpful to have on the transfer request form. My recommendation is we make those amendments and bring them back to this board for review and discussion next month. I think that's all the updates that I have at this time.
Any questions?
I have one, because I had a phone call, and I need to make a proper response. I'm going to use one example on the, two examples, on the Tapia and Ritter case.
Yeah.
They're appealing the judge.
Yeah.
Does the judge make that decision as to how many water rights they get, or does it have to come through this Watermaster court?
We are to talk with Ritter and Tapia directly about the fact that they're, at least in Tapia's case, a defaulted party and is appealed the judgment and is a small pumper. So his production rights are set forth in the judgment. And that's how I plan on dealing with him. Ritter is another, he's got several different iterations. He was the non-appearing party, but he's on the small pumper list. How this happens beats me, but he is. So his pumping needs to take place pursuant to the guidelines of the small pumper in the judgment. So I think we're guided by the judgment. What we're talking about here is people that we have a suspicion or pumping outside the terms of the judgment or in excess of what their rights are, how to bring that back, how to get metering going, and how to pay for replacement water and excess water that's being used above their rights under the judgment.
Watermaster board, and then if it goes past us with some kind of appeal, then it goes back to
If they
in
don't,
that order.
right, if they don't like what this board does, decide to, as to how to handle them, they can take that decision and resolution, appeal it to the court.
Thank you.
And I'll have both those individuals on the list for next month as to how, what their rights are. Very complicated, but bottom line is they're small pumpers. They have rights as small pumpers.
I have made the point several times to staff about how did we get the list of pumpers regardless what class they're in. And it seems to me, and maybe they've got to answer that question, it seems to me like we should have or could have, we should now, check with the county, with health and so on, and see who has registered wells. I think that's a process that would tell us some of those wells that we don't know, or we don't know about and are pumping. So, have we got any kind of answer to that? Whether or not they can provide a list?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't checked with county health yet.
And it'd be LA County and Kern
And
County,
Kern County.
right? And maybe Ventura County. No, that's ours. That's not. Okay. Kern and
Does that make sense that they would certainly, in an old well, I'm certainly not going to be registered, but the new one certainly would be.
Greg, one of the guys you mentioned that said they were mischaracterized.
Yes.
The judgment,
Yes.
that they never got notified, how would they know?
Their comment was there you go. Their client, who's on the small pumper list, has no indication or record of being served in the legal action, ever. And
But they
so,
got on the list.
my humble opinion,
Yeah.
they're on the list. And if they want to move in a different direction from that, they can take that up with the court. I don't think this board is in the place to start shifting people from list to list.
Craig, following up with that question, how could we shift people? There's the water that has been allocated, has been distributed, so we wouldn't have the power to do that.
We don't have the power to operate, to modify the judgment
Right.
in that way, period.
Unless they're in the small pumper class, that's kind of.
Well, yeah. I had a question about the intervening party, the issues you had brought up.
Yes.
So I'm imagining it's going to take a lot of your time to, we're not having you object to it, but to clarify it, to be there. And if this continued to be a problem with people in the future, how, do you have a recommendation how to solve it?
Well, one way to solve it is just to say it doesn't meet any criteria for the motion, should be denied, and by the way, this person needs to get a lawyer and move in that direction. I thought that was a little bit difficult to, or would be a little bit stringent in this case, because the board has already acted to approve this transfer.
And I'm looking at the future. Is there a way that before we approve a transfer, that it's kind of a parallel course, that the intervention has to be, the motion to intervene has to be given to the court as part of the transfer process.
That's my understanding from the judgment and the rules is that the permission of the court to become a party really ought to precede any action on the transfer. And if we took that position that we aren't going to approve a transfer until the party successfully intervenes, that might help the situation. What I'm frankly concerned about is I'm going to fix this person's motion after a lot of work. And the signal is that you can do anything you want to intervene, and the Watermaster Council will fix it.
And that's my concern, that we're going to be spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars being the attorneys for people who are transferring water without hiring attorneys to properly intervene, and that's not something I would be in favor of.
I understand. One option is to simply say, it doesn't appear this person has standing as a trustee to bring this matter as a self-represented person, needs to have counsel. There's no points of authority, there's no proposed order. There's no indication that it cooperated with the engineer. There's zero compliance with any rules. I can knock this out with certainty on September 12th. It's just, you're going to have an irate person as a result.
Well, I think that's something this board has to face, because if we allow this one to go through, then everyone else stands in line and says, why aren't we treating them the same? And I mean, I'm an advocate for simplifying the rules and making it easy to do, but not when it's going to cost the taxpayers or the producers a lot of money in legal fees to fix things for people who aren't doing it right. That's not what we're here to do.
I agree with that, and I thought our action was we approved the transfer, but he had to intervene. That's not intervening with your skills, that's intervening with his own skills. So I would just tell the judge that if he didn't meet the criteria, he didn't meet it. If the judge wants to approve it sloppily like that, that's out of our hands.
I can do that.
And I'm more concerned about going forward, not looking back. But again, we're going to be spending a lot of money on your time just to be appearing and commenting after reading, and it could have been a lot easier than this, or should have been.
I like the message to get out. The motions to intervene are not complicated, but I highly recommend they retain counsel to get it done simply, because this is going to take 3 times the amount of time to fix.
We've got a lot of people that intervene. I mean, this is the first one that you're going to have to.
We approved a motion on August 9th. The template is there for anyone who wants to do it. All they have to do is retain counsel, use the same lawyer that got it approved on August 9th, or whoever. It's a simple process, but it's now gotten very complicated because it's done improperly.
I think that's in the heart of the message.
Yeah, I know. I'm just concerned about setting precedent for the next person who does the same thing, and then the next, and the next, and pretty soon we're into it for $25,000, $50,000, $100,000, and that's not fair to the people, or to the people looking for it.
Couldn't agree more.
So how do we do it?
My recommendation, if that's the desire of the board, is I will definitely do that. I'll file a paper explaining that there's lack of compliance with the judgment, the rules and regulations, there's no declaration, there's no order, and this person may not have standing to be self-represented. Leave it at that. I'll tell the court that we approved the transfer. We're not trying to play games, but this is legally insufficient motion to the court that we can't approve in our position as Watermaster.
And for the public going forward, is there a way we can tie the process into our transfer process?
I'll go back and look at the rules and regulations, because my understanding is that they are fairly clear that it's expected that there will be a motion to intervene as a party because transfers occur between parties. And we want to have somebody a party to the judgment before the transfers.
Right. So can we, according to the judgment, can we have conditional approval? And I don't know what way you want to do it, but could it be conditional approval of transfer subject to approval of the motion to
That's how I
intervene?
make the resolution going forward, is subject to intervening as the party successfully in the judgment.
And then the transfer would not take place until that occurred.
Until
That, and what does the board feel about that? John? Leo?
Yes, I agree.
Richard? So consensus is for us to do that, and then Craig's position on this motion to intervene, we all agree what Craig has recommended. John, Dennis, Leo, Richard? Yes, okay. So Craig, our consensus is you fix it. Oh, we're gonna get a card, good. Sounds right. Tom, you wanna talk on the attorney report? Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Tom Bunn. During our discussion just now, I thought I'd comment that I represent another water master that has a similar problem where new parties have to intervene. And what we did in that case was to put together what amounts to a form. Mr. Parton mentioned a template that people could follow. That could be a water master template, and that would have the effect that the parties, if they're individuals, they're allowed to represent themselves. As Mr. Parker said, technically somebody who's a trustee needs to have an attorney, a corporation needs to have an attorney. So it wouldn't eliminate the need for an attorney, but it would keep the cost of that attorney down. Because any attorney, whether they've been involved in the case or not, can take that form and modify it as needed. Cost the person $450 in court filing fees just to become a party to the case. And it seems to me that the water master's role should be to make it as easy as possible to intervene, because that's what we want to do. We want them to be parties to the case. So that's a suggestion that I have to the board. I don't want to, like I said, they still need to get an attorney, but it will make the process more streamlined. Judge Comar will get used to seeing the same applications. It's easier for him to grant or find problems with an application and so forth.
Great. That's a great idea. Could you share that with Craig, that form together? And then I guess we can put this on the agenda for the next meeting, see how it shakes out with the court and see what we do going forward. And then also on your report, I wanted to have a discussion on recording transfers, and I understand your advice to us. But maybe this is something to look at what other water master boards do, Mojave and the one that Tom represents. Because it seems to me that right now it's pretty easy to keep track of who has production rights. And I guess going forward, we're going to keep track of who has production rights through our transfer process. But at what point so someone buying a farm, they look on, how do they know that the water rights have been sold away from that farm? Maybe not our problem, but certainly something we should be concerned about. And I don't know what the answer is to that.
I gave the suggestion that Mojave essentially puts the pressure on transferors to show owner title report and show actual notice to all lien holders about any production right that's been transferred. And essentially, recordable document.
So Mojave does that now?
Yeah.
And is it going to be your recommendation we do something similar to that?
That was going to be my recommendation next month.
Okay.
With some specific language, how to go about doing that.
Okay. Very good. Any further discussion on that issue? And then finally, for our compliance with the judgment, the letters we sent out, you said there's 3 or 4 that have not responded.
Yes, correct.
Could we have staff send out a second notice to them? I would really like that we do everything possible to get everybody on board before we take the next steps. The intent is to get everybody to cooperate and work on this together, not to surprise anybody. So.
And to be sure that they received the notice appropriately.
Correct.
Certified.
And that's all the questions I have. Any other questions on the coming report? Seeing none, moving on to board members' requests for future agenda items. So, Craig, on the items coming back before us, the recording of transfers, intervening parties, and then the compliance with the judgment, I assume all those 3 items will be on the agenda next month. And
Yes.
if we need to take some action, we will put it on the agenda in a way that we can take action on.
Yes.
Great. And then any other agenda items that any of you want to have placed on the agenda?
I would assume there'd be a progress report on item 8C.
We can do that.
That's correct.
Okay. And any other items on the agenda?
Bruce, we talked about people pumping are not anywhere tonight besides this group here.
People that are pumping that aren't
On any, just their.
They're not a party, they're just out there within the jurisdiction of the court. We've got a couple, those letters should go to those folks, and a couple that we're thinking of have not responded. We're gonna follow up and make sure they got the letter. We continue to get no response, I'll suggest that. This is the last resort to have to go and enforce an injunction against any pumping in the basin. We don't wanna have to do that, it's expensive, it's time consuming. And this is their opportunity to meet voluntarily with staff and the engineer and try to work something out. But when we have a situation that we can confirm that they're not a party and we do intervene and they don't, we'll continue to do that.
Craig, could you just briefly tell us what the requirements would be to include court costs when we have to take these people to court?
Well, we have that under the judgment to be able to do that, flexibility to do that. So we seek fees, and the letter makes it clear all our court costs. We don't have any filing fees because we're exempt in the government code. But the attorney's fees, I will be careful to segregate my billing to make it clear that the time spent if we have to go to court with these people to seek all of our fees, recovery, and costs to enforce the judgment.
Would it be, and brainstorming question for all of you, would it be appropriate for the Watermaster Board through Craig to do a press release that kind of goes through the steps of what we're trying to do to get compliance and what the outcome's going to be? Because I think we believe there's other people out there pumping. The people that we're giving letters to are just the obvious ones we know about through people telling the staff. So at this point, it might be good that the local newspapers and we get something out that explains what we're looking at, what our concerns are, why, and what, if we have to go down that route, what happens, so everybody clearly understands it. Obviously, we don't want the public to be surprised by any of this, and those that may be doing this without knowing it, we have to get the word out in as many ways as we can.
It would be a huge effort, because it's essentially in the letter that went to these.
Exactly.
Already.
Just as a press release that encourages people who are aware of this, and is consensus to do that? John? Dennis? Yeah. Phyllis, did you have a comment?
Only that I guess it would be a follow-up, because staff did put together the unauthorized pumping of groundwater press release on July 10th.
Okay, great. And that went
So
in.
we'll be able to-
Great,
that's a
okay.
follow-up of that. But that does go through, property owners have the opportunity to be a party to the judgment, advantage to intervening, and invites everyone to contact Watermaster staff to get the details.
Got it.
Is that published?
Well, it was a press release, so.
It was published.
I believe it's on the website as well.
Have we done anything with our water realtors? Isn't there a local water realtors that gets together and?
There it is. And I just received an email a few days ago from somebody with that group, as requested somebody from Watermaster come to one of their future meetings and give a presentation.
Great.
So once we maybe modify some of these forms, after the next meeting, then we could maybe make a presentation to that group.
That would be a great way to get the word out. Okay. Any other discussion? Any other agenda items? Meeting's adjourned.